Hello, I'm Tim Labinas with the Baptist Convention of Iowa, and I'm honored to have Dr. Chuck Kelley with us today. And Dr. Kelley is going to be our speaker at our Ministers and Wives Retreat that's coming up here on April 15th to 17th. And Chuck was gracious enough to give us a few minutes today to introduce himself and introduce the topics and to talk about what he would say that God is leading him to share at our conference. So Dr. Kelley, welcome.
Thank you. Delighted to be with you both today and looking forward to the retreat in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we're ready for it. Why don't you start by just introducing yourself a little bit and telling us a little bit of background so that the pastors among the churches of the Baptist Convention of Iowa, for those who don't already know you, can get to know you a little bit better.
Okay, be happy to. Well, my name is Chuck Kelley, and I was born and raised in Beaumont, Texas, which is on the Gulf Coast of Texas. Lived all my life there until I went to college at Baylor, the largest Baptist university in the world. And then from Baylor, I went to New Orleans Seminary, and my story there is a very sad story. I went there to do a 3-year MDiv program, and they finally let me leave 42 years later. I was a part of their damage control project of wanting to keep me there and keep me close, so I couldn't do too much damage in the world. So we spent 42 years in New Orleans as a student and then a faculty member teaching evangelism and then president of the seminary. I'm so very grateful for much of my life, nearly all of my life, being spent in the city of New Orleans, because although I am in the heart of the Southern Baptist Convention and have spent my life in the geographical South, New Orleans is a whole nother country. It is not Southern. It is not Baptist. Baptists are a small minority, often despised. People very suspicious about Baptists in general. And it gave me an opportunity to really feel closer to churches outside of the South than I do to our churches in the South. So I've lived my life knowing what it's like to be an unknown quantity, for people to have very negative images and associations of you when they learn that you're not only a minister, but a Baptist minister that is some of a lot of Baptist or worse, a cult kind of group. And our churches are mostly small and often struggling for survival there in New Orleans. We have quite a challenging environment in a lot of different ways. Tough place to raise up Baptist kids because they're in such a minority in the population of the city. And so it's given me a lot of feelings of kinship with places outside the Bible Belt. And that has been very good for me and has helped me learn a lot of things. And that's actually why God sent me to New Orleans. I was literally planning on going to another seminary, had all of our plans set. It was absolutely ideal for us. It could not have been more ideal. My wife got the job she went to college to be able to get in that city as soon as she graduated, and we were all set to go. I was already preaching all over Texas, doing revivals and things like that. I'm an evangelist by calling. And it was just very obvious. They had a great evangelism program, and that was my calling. It was very obvious that was the place to go. But God intervened literally at the last minute. And during a day of fasting and prayer, made it very clear He wanted me to go to New Orleans. And to say that I was shocked is a vast understatement, because nobody there knew me. They wouldn't call on me to lead in silent prayer. There was I'd never spent much time over there in that part of the country. They had no evangelism program whatsoever, none, no evangelism professor. And as God began to make this very, very clear to me, I said, but Lord, what in the world am I going to? Maybe you haven't read the catalogs of the schools. Believe me, this is not the preparation that I'm looking for. And God made it clear He wanted me to live in a place where every other person wasn't a Baptist or a Methodist, and where I would be learning evangelism, not from a professor in a classroom, but I would be learning evangelism from living and doing life in a place where evangelical Christianity was a small presence and where the culture was completely different from the culture I grew up in. So that's kind of who I am, and that has shaped me a very great deal. The president of the seminary, when I was a student and on the faculty, had very strict rules about attendance for professors as well as students. And so we could only miss 5 days of class a semester for any reason whatsoever, including your own funeral. And therefore, a lot of the preaching that I did, I had to because of necessity. I couldn't go very far afield on any day other than Sunday. And so to do revivals and evangelistic events and things like that, I had to be able to get there and back in a day by, at least by midnight the night before, so I could be back in class the next day. And as a result, most of the churches within a 200-mile radius of New Orleans are smaller churches. And so I learned a lot about Baptists by being in the typical Baptist church. 70% of all Baptist churches have less than 100 people present on any given Sunday morning. 90% of all Southern Baptist churches have 250 people or less on any given Sunday morning. And that's where I did so much of my ministry and my work. So it's given me an understanding of Southern Baptists from the ground up, and pastors and the kinds of circumstances pastors are in from the ground up, and an understanding of what it's like to be a Baptist preacher in a Baptist church in a place where that is not a point of pride in the community. And it can often create some barriers you have to overcome just to be open and honest about being a Baptist. So it's been good for me, and I've enjoyed the ministry, and I'm looking forward to being there with you to just kind of talk about some of the things that I've learned along the way.
We are so looking forward to it. As we were praying through our ministry life retreat, your name came up because last year our conference was canceled because of COVID and all the things that have happened, and we decided we were looking for someone who would come and be a pastor to the pastors who was seasoned, had some good experience, and was somebody who was known to be an encourager of pastors. And your name came to the top of the list, and so we're grateful that you've been made available for our retreat here in a couple of weeks. And I was just curious, as our pastors have been fairly disrupted, some of them locked down, some of them just opening up. What would be a message that you would have for the pastors and their wives who might be in the room when you're there in a couple of weeks?
Well, first of all, I would say there are things that you can't learn in any other circumstance but this. And we talk about wanting to really develop our faith and deepen our relationship with God, and we want to really draw near to Him. Guess what? You cannot do that unless you walk the hard road. For there are things God can only teach us in the very difficult, challenging stretches of life. And so in a lot of ways, this last year has been a great opportunity for us, not simply to learn some things about ministry we never knew before, but also to draw near to God in some ways we could not in easier times or happier times. And so we'll talk a bit like that. I'll also share some of the things I've had along the way. I never knew I was capable of depression. I have always been a very upbeat kind of person. Matter of fact, when I played high school football, I was a linebacker and a center, and it made my coach extremely angry that I was leading our team in tackles and leading our team in fumbles caused and fumbles recovered and leading our team in hits that shook people up and made them lead the game. And it made him really mad because I was smiling all the time. And he said, how can we have a linebacker who smiles all the time? And I've just always been a very happy kind of person. But I will tell you, life brings lots of different things to us. And I learned when our world blew up And my wife and I, all we could do was just hug each other and cry. I learned that even somebody like me was very capable of depression and discouragement. And what do you do in those circumstances? And how do you deal with that? Another thing that I hope I'll have a chance to talk about is the very important lessons that come out of a stretch like we've had. Let me give you just one example. The Illinois Baptist Convention asked me to write an article for them on things I learned in our Katrina experience that might be relevant to the aftermath of the pandemic. And one of the things I said to them is that you learn when you go through a catastrophic kind of event and everything gets turned upside down. And you are only thinking about one thing, and that is, how do we survive? How do we keep it going? And you do some things that you've never imagined doing. You do some things you've never conceived of doing. They were not on your hopes, your dreams, your goals, your aspirations. You just have to figure out things to do in order to keep it going. You get on the other side of that, you get beyond that, and you discover some of those things that were so incredibly radical at the time now become standard operating procedure. They become a very important component of your ministry. God just never wastes the challenging moments in our life. And that's often what draws us ahead and further down the path of our kingdom service for Him. So these are the kinds of things that I hope we'll have a chance to talk about and just talk very openly and honestly and personally. We'll also be around, of course, not just standing up and speaking, but around the conference center and the facilities and the sessions. And if guys want to talk about anything at all, my wife is coming with me, bringing her along, and she'll be there to chat with the ladies. And we'll both be available just for a personal conversation if anybody wants to talk. Because one thing Katrina has taught us is we all need each other. And we are seeing our whole nation really eager to start getting back together again. Did you ever know going out to eat in a restaurant with friends, which was such a normal activity, would be such a rare, prized activity to do together? And we've learned how much fellowship and community affects us because we couldn't have it. And this time last year, we were starting our lockdown here in Alabama. I wrapped up literally today. I finished my last event. I would have finished it a day or two earlier, but it was for a little association of rural churches in a rural area when the lockdown announcement came. And I asked the pastors, we had one more night to go. I asked the pastors, do you want to continue? If you want to, I'll stay one more day. Or do you want to shut it down right now and let's all go home and see how we deal with this? And pastors talked and they said, we really want to continue to tomorrow. And so we did, and had a guy who drove all the way from North Dakota to see family in this little tiny Alabama town, was not a Christian. And in our last service, he made a profession of faith, and he came weeping to the front and he said, Dr. Kelley, you did this whole meeting just for me to come down from North Dakota and hear about Jesus and be saved. And then for the next 3 months, we were here and wasn't doing any, when you're an itinerant minister, that pretty much ended itinerant ministry. And I did a few things on Zoom and stuff like that. But it really changed the dynamics of so much of what I was doing. But I learned a lot. So I think we all have experiences to talk about, and I will share with you some of the things that God has taught me. And if you want to take the conversation in a different direction while I'm there, we'll take the conversation in a different direction. Because the most important thing I want to do is to be there for you and to help you in any way that I can and to encourage you. Because you're somebody God has called. You are somebody God has gifted. He has given you specific work that he wants you to do. And that makes you a pretty important person. So it's a great honor to me to be able to come there and spend some time with you at our retreat this year.
And Dr. Kelley, I'm so glad you mentioned that you and your wife were going to be there and available for the guys. Some years we focus on a kind of training session or a conference or a seminar. And this year we decided that we would frame our time together as a retreat. And so we will have plenty of time built in where they can reconnect with one another and get time with you, and to get time just alone with the Lord in their hotel room. And we are looking forward to our people just being refreshed. And we're grateful that you're going to help lead us in all of that and be available both in front of us and beside us as we spend a few days together. As we wrap up our time here, I was wondering if you could just comment on a couple of things that you've observed as opportunities that are specific because of what happened with COVID, and then how, when perhaps in a few months or a few years, we'll look back and see that God was working in a way and creating new opportunities for churches and pastors to do ministry like never before. Have you had any observations like that?
Well, one thing for sure is we have had more people overhearing the gospel probably than any other time in the history of the United States. And by that, I mean being present, lost people, unchurched people, but being present or listening or tuning in to worship services because they're available online, YouTube, Zoom, things like that, that they can turn into, the churches have had to do. I think last Easter Sunday, more people heard the gospel story last Easter Sunday than ever before in the history of Christianity. Because people had a lot of spiritual questions, and they were able to go to local churches, well-known churches. They could listen as much as they want to and never have to let anybody know that they were there and tuned in. And I think we've had an opportunity to share the gospel with people that will never know about it until later, that it just created a threat-free zone through these online things that we've done to expose people to the gospel. The second thing I think has been a great benefit is our church is experiencing the power of innovation. I mean, who in the world knew that small Baptist churches would be able to do the things that they have done in the last year? They are often thought of as being very traditional, very set in their ways. So I told you I was with an association. We were doing association revival, doing a different church every night, my last event before the lockdown. And then the news of the lockdown that was coming came, and to listen to pastors as they talked about whether or not we were going to continue, we made that decision. And then they talked for a while about Sunday. What were they going to do on Sunday if they could not gather? And to hear these guys and the ideas that they came up with, because small churches don't have a tech department, okay? And they would love to have a Ben, but they don't have a Ben who's very well acquainted with all the technology and things, but they figured it out. Some of my favorites, that discussion 1 year ago, I loved it. One pastor said, well, I think what I'm going to do is stand in our parking lot between 11:30 and 12. And if people want to come by and drop off their tithe or their Annie Armstrong offering, I'll have a bucket, and they can drive past and they can drop it in the bucket, and I can say hello to them or say a prayer for them. And we're just going to have drive-through offerings. Well, what church would have done that?
Right.
For all of this? So I think churches understanding they could figure it out, and churches dealing with some of the tensions along the way between the wear the mask all the time and I don't want to wear a mask kind of people, and figuring out how to do worship service. And we gradually started coming back. I was at a church last Sunday that I always, in this last year, when I go to a church, I get there and I sit in the parking lot for about 10 minutes and I just watch people go to the church to see, are they wearing masks when they go in or not? 99% of the people were not wearing masks when they went in at the time that I was there. So I didn't wear my mask at that point in time. we went in, and when I got up on the platform, what I saw is that one section of the auditorium, everybody was wearing masks.
Mm.
And the way they had it set up, if you want to wear a mask the whole time, no one can sit there unless you're wearing a mask. And other people can sit other places and do what you want to do. And then when we had the invitation, and I was so proud of the staff because they had not been wearing masks for the service, of course, as they're doing the various things, that invitation started, and the two staff members who were receiving people to come had their mask on, standing down there at the end of the aisle so that people would feel safe coming in. Solving these problems has been a very good experience for most of our churches, and I've been very proud of them for the way they have solved the problem. So, yeah, there are a lot of positive things I think we've been able to pick up from these most unusual days.
Yes, very good. And to pastors and other ministry leaders of the Baptist Convention of Iowa, I think you've heard we have something special planned for you next month. And we would invite you to sign up to be part of the Ministry Life Retreat and hear from our speaker, Dr. Chuck Kelley. And he's, I think, the right one for us, God's man, for this retreat with his experience and his knowledge and his passion to follow you, to follow Jesus and to minister to pastors and wives. He's had a generation of doing so. And we ask you to sign up. We think this will be a great retreat for you. Dr. Kelley, is there any final words that you'd like to say as we wrap up?
I love you. I want you to know you have my profound respect and my deepest appreciation, and indeed my love for serving God's kingdom in the place where you're serving, and for sustained, continual movement towards the kingdom of God in spite of these incredibly unusual circumstances that have been thrown at you. I love you. I respect you and appreciate you. And I would love the privilege of being able to meet you and say hello to you. I hope you'll be able to come and join us. And again, my wife will be with me, and I know she feels the same way about this. If ever there was a time to come apart from your routine for a couple of days and to be with other people in ministry, this is that time. This will be that place. And there'll be lots of stuff going on in your life. What pastor doesn't have lots of stuff going on all the time? But I think this will be worth a priority. And I just want you to know that everything that I say is going to be coming from a heart of someone who really cares about you, cares about your ministry, and just loves the fact that you are out of the Bible Belt, as I spent most of my life out of the Bible Belt. You're out of the Bible Belt, and you're in a place where Baptists are probably not the largest group in the area, the Christian family in the area, but you're serving Jesus, and you're doing it well. So I hope I get to see you. We'll look forward to that coming up real soon.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Kelley. I look forward to seeing you in just a few days and getting some time with you. And I also want to thank you for your time this afternoon to meet with me and with some of our pastors from Iowa.
Thank you, Brother Tim. I really enjoyed it.